Sir, how feasible is satellite imagery when it comes to digital lending?
So, if you look at satellite imagery, it's quite relevant from an Indian context. Given that we have about half our population is engaged into farming, we have over 15 crore land holdings. 86% of that is small and marginal farmers. So it becomes very difficult for banks to reach the last mile and cater to these really small and marginal farmers and assess what the risk of lending is. As a result of which, what happens is that a large part of our farmers, about 60%, only have access to formal lending. The other 40% then actually goes to the other sources of financing where the interest rates are much higher, right? They could be to the tune of about 36%, 50%, sometimes even 100%, right? If you think about 1% a day of loan, which is the case in some of the unorganized sectors, it goes 365%. So to make sure that the farmers don't have to fall in that trap of being highly indebted, I think satellite imagery has a critical role to play. Now the question is, how do we use all of the information that is coming from satellite imagery to convert that into a risk score, which eventually talks to the ability of the farmers to pay, right? So that the banks can appreciate that risk score, and that talks to the non-performing asset, that is the NPA performance. Now that's a slightly complicated problem to solve, and the reason I say that is about 40% of the farmer's earning source is from crop cultivation. The other sources of income could be livestock, dairy, wages, also remittance income. So this brings us to the place of how do you assess risk score, right? Because the ability, or rather, if a farmer pays a loan or not, is a function of his ability to pay and his willingness to pay. So the risk score needs to factor both of these. So one of the information that will factor is, okay, what is the crop that the farmer has sown this year? What is the crop that the farmer had sown the previous year? Is there consistency in the crop that the farmer is sowing? That is, he have good experience in that crop. What is the yield for that particular crop? How does that yield compare to the village average, to the district average, to the state average, which will give us an assessment on how good the farming technique is being utilized. Is he or she using the right inputs, pesticide, fertilizer, mechanization? So better yield will be indicators of that, maybe good quality seeds. Now that will give us a sense on one aspect of the risk, which is the ability to pay. So if there is good yield, we can say that, okay, there is a good potential. If the yield translates into good prices, then the farmer has a good ability to pay. Second, one can superimpose what are the other sources of income that the farmer has. So for example, if he has income on the side of cattle, if there is income on the side of remittances, that adds to the income of the farmer. And then finally, to assess the willingness to pay, that's a behavioral aspect. And then there have been various studies that have been done globally. For example, if a farmer is having, staying in a joint family versus in a nuclear family, there is correlation to suggest that people staying in a joint family have the higher propensity to pay. Is he sending or she sending their children to an English medium school, right? These are aspects that one has to further look at behaviorally to understand and build that also into the risk score to eventually address both the ability to pay and the willingness to pay. And now all of this then boils down to the accuracy of the information. Now, is the satellite imagery that is forecasting or assessing the yield, how accurate is it, right? It may be accurate in certain regions, may not be accurate in certain other regions, may be accurate for few crops, may not be accurate for few crops. But definitely the trend is, as we go along, the accuracy is likely to increase, and more we will see these tools being utilized for digital lending.